Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. It's Friday. I'm Haggerty 10, Twitter handle Tony Haggerty, as you can see, and I'm joined this morning by Alison McConnell. How are you, Alison? You all right?
Very well, thank you. Just waiting on this snowstorm to come.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I think we're all waiting on that. Yep. Nice one. I'm East Kilbride, so we'll get it bad or worse than most. Now, the morning after, the night before, Alison, Celtic 1, Bodo Glimt 3. First question first. Where did it all go wrong?
I thought it was a very sobering night for Celtic. I think it was maybe just puts into perspective where they are just now. I think last week you're hearing people talking about a quadruple and going and winning the tournament, and people getting very excited on the back of the last few weeks. And I think it was maybe just a reminder that this is a team that still has a fair bit of work to do. But I thought they actually started well. I thought in the opening minutes, it looked like a fairly aggressive start from Celtic. But once they lost that goal, what was it, 7 minutes or so, and they lost a goal, I thought they were rattled. I thought like they really struggled to find their composure after it. I thought part of that was down to the way, of course, that Bodo Glimt played and the way they pressed Celtic. They kind of played them at their own game, if you like. But I thought Celtic really struggled to find their groove after that at any point in the game. I think there was a brief point towards the end, maybe like a 5-minute spell just shortly after James Forrest had come on, but I think it just was a very, very poor overall display, and I think you'd struggle to find anyone in that team last night who really emerged with pass marks.
Now, the team was announced obviously before the game, but a curveball in there. He put O'Reilly and Rogic and McGregor in the midfield and rotated to Tati, rotated him to the bench. Hindsight's a great thing, Alison. A lot of people saying that he got that decision wrong and he should have started with Giakoumakis up front, but it's easy to say that when Celtic had lost 3-1. But was that a surprise for you? It was certainly a surprise for me, seeing O'Reilly and Rogic in the same team in a European game.
Yeah, it was. I think, as we were chatting about before we came on, I think you've got two kind of attack-minded midfielders. I think exactly agree with you. Like, hindsight, things always look a bit different. Like, I think Celtic looked overrun at times in the middle of the park, I felt. I thought they looked very exposed on the left-hand side too. But I think it was a surprise. I thought Hatate would have started. I thought he was... I thought he would have been actually one of the first names on the team. So this goes to show that my opinion counts for very little in reality. But I think it didn't work. I think you have to just stand back and say it didn't work. It was a poor performance overall. I think Bodo Glimt were quite cute. You know, you would have to say how they played, how they done their homework, their pre-match huddle. When Celtic done their huddle, they all went into huddle, the bench, all their coaches, all their substitutes, all done their own huddle. Then when Celtic got one back, the same again. You know, a wee huddle, a wee sense of unity and resilience. And then before you know it, they got a kind of fortuitous deflection to give them back a 2-goal cushion. And I think it now becomes very, very difficult for Celtic going over to Norway next week. And I would take Ange Postecoglou's point at it's half-time, but I don't know that there was any evidence here that would lead you to believe that Celtic will overcome that deficit, particularly when you consider that they looked very clinical, and that if Celtic go and attack the game, that they run the risk, obviously, then of leaving themselves open at the back.
I'm loath to use the expression, but I used it in a colour piece that I did and said that kind of Celtic were kind of out-Anged-balled. Basically, you know, they kind of played Celtic at their own game, didn't they? When they had the ball, they were pretty slack in possession, and then when they got it in the areas that could hurt Celtic, they did hurt Celtic. You know, Carl Starfelt's drawn to the ball for the first goal, that creates that opening. You can say Taylor was maybe could have been picking up his man, and then the second goal, the guys just outstripped Taylor for pace, and you know, Cameron Carter-Vickers has been done with a wee flick to the side. Juranovic has allowed Pellegrino to come off. So a whole kind of plethora of errors there, but they knew what they were doing. They were a decent side, weren't they?
I thought they were a good side. I thought they played very well. I would agree with you. I thought they played a very similar style to Celtic's, as we'd anticipated. I I thought they were clinical too. I thought they took their chances when they had them. I did think there was a lot came down that left-hand side. I thought there was a real exposure there. That I think Celtic maybe at times have got away with it this season, but I thought it was exposed, and it maybe just raises a question. Everyone's very excited about this league campaign and the fact it opens the door to Champions League group stages, or the likelihood is it'll open a door to that. But when you see in Europe's third tier competition just where you are, I think it maybe just exposes how much work Celtic have got to do if you want to get to that kind of level where you're going into the Champions League. Now, I would take the point, it's really about finances. It's almost, about what that money can do. But in terms of just where they are, of competing against that calibre of team, and we're talking about it with the greatest will in the world here, we're talking about a team that very few people would be well aware of. If you want to go and compete in the Champions League in 6-7 months down the line, I think you can see that there's a fair bit of work that still needs to be done. And what I do think is that the performances of weeks, and I'm thinking of that Motherwell game.
Oh, Wi-Fi gone again. I'll take some comments in the meantime here until Alison comes back. Monots52 comes in and says, agree, Tony. Bodo did an Ange to us. Press moved and forced to pass back. Also in progress, yes, but so is Bodo. Indeed. And Frank Brennan comes in and says, morning, Frank, how you doing? What should be a very huge area of concern is that yet again, when we come up against a wee bit of quality, and Bodo are quality, our so-called big players yet again completely fail to turn up. Is that you back in the room, Alison? Back in the room. Excellent.
I hope so. That's the snow coming on here, so I hope so.
But just read a comment from Frank there, and he makes a fair point that Celtic's big players fail to turn up. You're looking at Jota, Abada, Rogic. And I wasn't particularly lambasting the likes of Taylor or Starfelt. I was just, or Juranovic, just marking out their culpability in the goals that were conceded. But I also take on board that some of our Celtic's big players fail to turn up, like Abada, Rogic and Jota, and you just can't have that in a European game because inevitably that's what happens.
Yeah, I actually thought it was probably one of Jota's poorest games. I thought there was very little that came from him. I thought the crosses, deliveries into the box were off. Last night it was the same ball time and time again. I thought it wasn't until James Forrest came on that Celtic actually started to get some decent balls into the box. I thought Abada and Jota were poor. And I think I just wonder psychologically if there is an element of underestimating Bodo Glimt. And I don't mean that it's a conscious thing, but I think sometimes when you know you're up against a team of prestige and fairly well known and who carry their own European weight, that you maybe know you have to lift your game. I just thought it felt very flat last night in terms of the performance. I thought the stadium was flat. I thought as soon as they went a goal down, I thought that the crowd were very quiet. I think they've become used to seeing a winning Celtic side again after last season. And I think there was just quite a fair bit of food for thought on offer with the performance. But I would take your point. I think you would struggle to find anyone that came out of the game well last night. Yeah,
I mean, I thought that Matt O'Reilly had a decent first half, but he faded and Maeda put in a power of work. But apart from the chance that he shot off the goalkeeper's chest in his header, he started a real decent service, wasn't he? He was running about and making space, but he just never seemed to be found.
Yeah, and a few things that didn't come off too. I think those early first minutes, you can see his pace and you can see how Celtic were trying to utilise it to get him in behind. And I thought it was a fairly positive start, but I thought the wind was knocked entirely out of Celtic's sails just when they lost the goal. And I just thought they were rattled by it. I don't know that they found any composure for any decent spell after that. And I think it's very unlike them. When you look at the performances of recent months, it's quite the level of performance was quite unusual, and I thought it was lacklustre. I thought a number of players just didn't contribute in the sense that you've been used to it, and I think some of that comes down to the visitors. I think you have to give them some credit for the manner in which they pressed Celtic, they harried Celtic, they didn't allow them time on the ball, they didn't allow them the space to work in. and they restricted them at times. And then, of course, when you're clinical at the other end, you're always going to give yourself a real opportunity of taking something.
I mean, nobody's saying Bodo, Glimt or Barcelona, but they've been working on that system for the past 2 or 3 years, and you can see that they've more or less perfected it, and they're good at it, and they're a well-drilled, competent, organised side, and as you say, they're clinical when they get the chances, and they were clinical last night. And you mentioned a word there, underestimating opposition. Do you think Ange would allow that, or did it creep in just recently because of the way they had played? But there were signs against Aberdeen that it wasn't firing on all cylinders. Then obviously he made the changes against Wraith, and it wasn't great, but they got there in the end. But do you think Celtic are in that position where they can afford to underestimate teams?
I don't think they're in a position where they can afford to underestimate anyone. And I don't think it's a conscious thing. I just wonder sometimes if at the back of your mind, if you're going in to play Barcelona or a Liverpool or a team that carries its own weight, one of the real household names in European football, I think there's an edge to the game. I think you know that you have to be at your best. You have to lift your game. I think sometimes it just encourages a level of concentration and focus, whereas last night I just thought they were so off the pace at times, and so many players off the pace that you just wondered if they just seemed to be missing an edge going into the game, that there just seemed to be something lost there. And I don't know if it is an underestimating of the team they were up against, or whether it was just the fact that they were played at their own game and struggled to find their feet, struggled to find their composure. But certainly I think they have got a huge ask now if they're going to try and come back into it.
My next question was, can they rescue it? It's half-time. Ange seems to believe it. He was very adamant that it's only half-time, and probably saying they won't play like that again. But I guess it's a tall order, but nothing's impossible. We've seen teams go away from home and play really well, and then at home get turned over themselves. So, I mean, there's still a chance, but the third goal's crucial, isn't it? I think that could be the one that could do for Celtic in the Europa Conference League.
Yeah, 3-1's a funny kind of scoreline, although when you take out the away goals rule again, it maybe changes the complexion of things a bit. But I mean, I seem to remember Celtic winning 3-1 against Bâle at home in a Champions League qualifier, and then going out when they lost over in Switzerland. I think much will depend on how they start the game. I think you've seen decent European performances this season in terms of scoring goals. I think you could trust them to find a goal in the game. But what you really have to look at now is the amount of goals that have been conceded across European football this season, from the qualifiers right up to last night. Celtic are conceding an average, I think, of 3 goals a game, which you're going nowhere in Europe with stats like that and with a defence like that. And it's something that definitely needs consideration going forward into next season. But to take your point, if Celtic score an early goal, then all of a sudden it's on. You've got the opportunity to go and ask the question. But of course, I think there is a real danger then that you also concede that, that in your haste to go and try and chase the game and get back into it, that you leave yourself exposed. And I think what we have seen in European football is that's a real issue for Celtic.
How does Celtic sort that, Alison, that defensive frailty? What do you do? Is it just hard work in the training ground every day up until they play Bodo next week? How do you eradicate those mistakes?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think we're in the middle of a season now. The transfer window's shut. It's not. I think long term, I think it's about better players in those positions. I think it's about bringing in maybe superior quality in certain areas of the pitch. But in the short term, I think it is about working on things and trying to solidify elements of the game. And you've seen repeatedly the same kind of mistakes that are being made and the same vulnerabilities. I wondered about Christopher Julian last night, about how where he is, and in terms of fitness, I still think it's probably too soon for him. But I think over the next few weeks, you might see him come straight back into the team whenever he is at a stage where he's deemed to be fully match fit.
Do you subscribe to the theory that a lot of Celtic supporters are now thinking that if they get knocked out of the Europa Conference League, it's a blessing in disguise because they can concentrate on the league everybody has had their say on the fact that the league winning the title this season is paramount because of the money that's involved in direct entry into Champions League group stages. Do you think like that, Alison? Because a lot of Celtic supporters are thinking like that now.
Yeah, I think it's a search for a silver lining. I think sifting among the wreckage, there is always just trying to find a crumb of comfort. I think, you listened this week, you watched people getting excited, people talking about where the final was going to be winning 4 trophies. And I think football fans are very good at changing the narrative depending on circumstance. I think the league campaign was always the be-all and end-all. I think particularly this season, just because of the finances that it can give rise to. And there's an argument, I think, to say that this season's title is probably even more important than last year's. I think last year's was important for different reasons. This season, when it opens the door to the finances that come with Champions League football, it's absolutely huge. And I think it has always been the priority. But I think you have to be honest and say Celtic and their supporters wanted their cake and they wanted to eat it too. They wanted all of it. I don't think they were, but if it's a question of priority, then I don't think there's any competition.
It's also as well, Alison, that the work is still in progress. You'd have to say that after tonight. It's still a work in progress, but it's ahead of schedule, considering what Ange inherited back in June, and to be still in with a shout of qualifying Europa Conference, but having won the League Cup, still in the Scottish and at the top of the table. The Celtic fans would have took this right at the start of June. So they are ahead of schedule and they're pleased with the way they're playing. And, the focus is now they've got 12 league games to go, Scottish Cup quarter-final and a second leg of a Europa Conference League. They just have to get their head around the fact that they're all big games now and they just have to adopt a certain mentality. But the biggest thing is they have to turn up and compete.
Yeah, I think it's a sense of perspective. I think that's really what you're looking for now. I think there's still a fair bit of work to do, and I would agree with you. I think every game between now and the end of the season is huge. There's 1 point between the two teams. I think how Rangers reacted to losing to Celtic and losing in the manner they did was very important. I thought that for an hour against Hearts, they toiled. It was a bit of a struggle. You thought if Heart for an hour, you thought that Hearts might take something, and then of course they just ran over the top of them. And I think that game could be really fundamental in shaping the next few months, because it ensured that there wasn't any rot setting in. I think you now have a Rangers team who'll be buoyed by the performance and result last night. I think you couldn't detract from the fact that an incredible performance against Dortmund, a fantastic scoreline to take away. And they now have a bit of belief, a bit of momentum. It's a restoration of confidence after that very bruising night a couple of weeks ago at Celtic Park. And now I think Celtic, maybe not by the same scope, but they need a reaction now when it comes to Sunday's game against Dundee. I think they have to go out and it has to be a fairly compelling performance, but ultimately it has to be a performance about securing the points and just trying to restabilise after what will have knocked them a bit last night.
Yeah, David Bradley comes in and says it's a big test now. It is a big test now to see how Celtic handle that, because they were on a good unbeaten run domestically and a couple of European ties as well that they'd won at home. So yeah, it's about the reaction now, isn't it, Alison? They're not a bad team overnight and they're still well ahead of schedule. You use the word perspective, getting everything in perspective. Celtic are still in the driving seat to win the title. I know it's only a point ahead, but they're still in the driving seat to win it.
Yeah, I think it's probably just about not getting too carried away. I think it's probably about appreciating that, that this is a team, this is where they are. They're maybe not quite as fluent and as fluid as you may have thought from recent results. And I think there's maybe an exaggerated sense of how much they had come on. I think this maybe just serves as a reminder that there's still some work to do. But yeah, I think now it's about the reaction. It's about just getting a bit of confidence back into the team and getting winning results. And I think the be-all and end-all is the league this season. It's about not dropping points. It's about just continuing that head of steam in terms of the domestic run that they're on.
Well, we shall reconvene on Monday after the Dundee game, Alison, and see where Celtic are, see if they're still top of the table, and there is that reaction that you've called for. Thanks for your comments, guys. Always appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Have a good day today. Hope the snow's not too bad where you live. Thanks for your comments, Alison. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.